Hello, my name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 24 of The Grief of Politics. I'm joined once again by Avin Carroll. Avin, how you feeling? I know you were sick last time.
Much better. Sorry to leave you like that, but I couldn't talk, so I wouldn't have been very useful.
Yeah, I know. And then we're obviously going to go over housing again. We did it last month, but this is your area. You have your own YouTube channel devoted to real estate and housing, and you just finished up restudying to keep your renewed or just keep it. Yeah, renewed your real estate. So for me to just read your notes seemed very. I was like, I don't know what I'm. This seems interesting, but yeah. Just to remind everybody before we start, if you want to write to us, you can write to us at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. You can also watch the podcast. It hits on the 20th of every month on YouTube, so you can see our faces as we talk about politics and stuff like that. And we try to keep the focus of politics on how it affects normal people. The grief of passing policies that maybe hurt the little guy or not, we don't know, but we try to go over that every month. And if you like, subscribe, share the episodes. Avin and I are both really bad about promoting things we do. I know, well, I am anyway. I don't know about Avin, but I'm pretty bad about promoting my stuff. So even promoting this podcast, which I am on, I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably put it on Facebook or something. And I randomly remembered it
in the world where people might actually listen to it.
You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes, and we're on Spotify. We're actually doing really good. Probably next year we'll do we're almost closing in on 2 years. So the beginning of next year will be
this is episode 24. Wouldn't this be?
Years? Well, we started. Yeah, it's semantics. But next year we'll go over like listens and stuff like that. And I'm not going to do like a review thing because we're both here. It wouldn't be any good to review ourselves. I will say we'll probably get a new email address and stuff for the new year. Stuff like that. We'll probably just go over stuff like stats, like how viewership, because I think that's kind of neat. I'm kind of excited. It seems like on Spotify, more and more people are finding the podcast, and there's been a few more views on YouTube. So we're in the double digits, but we were in the single digits before. So any growth is growth. Any 5 more people listening to an episode is 5 more people listening to an episode.
Is this the any publicity is good publicity, Joe?
Okay, well,
I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy.
No, it's not.
That's where you're going.
There's been a lot of stuff in the news lately where I'm like, this isn't a good look for particular people. So, not all publicity is good publicity. But just this episode, I want to talk about housing again because, Avin, this is obviously your area of expertise, and we've had a little bit more time to mull over it. So I sent you articles, but really these are probably just touchstones to kind of start talking about the housing market. So what are not reading these articles, but your initial kind of thoughts on the housing market now? As you know, we talked about this like an hour before we were going to record last time, and you were sick. It was like before you got sick. Yep. And we were like,
I was sick.
Oh, well, we were just talking on like a car ride home. But I was driving back from a job site, and I was like, man, we should have recorded this. This was the episode basically. So what about what challenges, I guess, do people have now in the housing market today, like a first-time home buyer?
So,
60 seconds. No, I'm kidding. You take your time.
I really feel like this particular episode, probably of all of the episodes we've done, is probably the most broad-reaching as far as the grief related to politics goes, because almost every single American, with very limited people that have very high means to afford their housing, are experiencing the challenges of our current housing market. Rents are up, home prices are up, interest rates are up, homes are at all-time lows for affordability, and of course, as people can't afford to buy, people have to rent, which then landlords are like, hey, there's more renters. I'm going to raise my rents.
There's been a lot of stuff in the news too about how unscrupulous that has been. It has not been for some landlords. It has not been, I have extra costs, so I'm going to pass it on to the tenant. It's been, I can just raise the rent.
Supply and demand.
Right.
Supply is low, demand is high. The average American, I shouldn't say it that way because, I mean, that covers renters and everybody else. The average homeowner and prospective homeowner right now is running into some real challenges. The last couple of years, anyone who's looking to buy a home has seen home prices just skyrocket. And that was largely driven by interest rates during the pandemic. So if you've been under a rock, interest rates over the last couple of years had been at historic lows. In the last year, they've doubled. So we went from interest rates under 3%, around 3%, to now over 6%. At one point, over 7%, but it's backed off a little bit and come back down. All of that being driven by fear of inflation, which has also been incredibly largely driven by home costs, housing costs. So, anyone who's out there looking to buy is now looking at a market where home prices over the last 2-3 years have gone up 15-20% year over year in some markets. And then now interest rates have gone up. And to give you an idea, on a $400,000 purchase or $500,000 purchase, I don't remember the number exactly. But I believe it's a $400,000 purchase. 1% on an interest rate is $225 a month.
Yeah.
So
it used to be a lot. It used to be a lot less. I remember that when I got my home, which was years ago, it was like, it's $100, whatever. It was like way like that amount was pushed down. I do want to ask, so 6 or 7% sounds like years ago that was the average, but because of the 2008 crash and stuff, like all that stuff got readjusted. Because I remember when again, years ago when I was going to buy a home, people were like, what did you get for an interest rate? And it was like right after the crash. And I was like, like 3% or whatever. And they're like, what? Like mine, 10 years ago was 7 or 8% or whatever, So it almost seems like for good or bad, we have had it great for a while because of low interest rates. Yeah. And now that they're starting to go up, people are like, whoa. But I get that. I get why people are like, ugh.
If a single percent right now makes a difference of $225 a month, right?
Yeah.
Then, I mean, that one, for most Americans, $200 a month is a pretty big budget change.
Yeah, I just got a car payment. Yes, it is. It's a big.
And when interest rates have been holding pretty steadily for the last decade, maybe a little bit longer, and anywhere between 4 and 5%, when interest rates drop under 3%, homes become really affordable, and so that drove a crazy amount of demand in the marketplace. On the same note, during the pandemic, people didn't want strangers in their house.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
For good reason, right?
There was new protocols around cleaning, wasn't there? Like
there was a ton of new rules and protocols all across the country for real estate showings, open houses. The real estate industry pivots really quick. Now, one of the advantages of the real estate industry being largely conducted by independent contractors, you're able to pivot really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
You get creative, you find new ways to do it. And one of those big, huge shifts that a lot of smaller brokerages, larger brokerages, and agents, brokers across the country did was going to virtual tours. We now, in our phones, have these cameras that go with us everywhere that have really good video quality. And thanks to 4G, 5G networks, it's not hard for us to stream pretty high quality as long as we're not, out in the sticks.
Right.
And so there was a lot of pivoting in the industry and how we do things. But again, people didn't want people in their homes very much. And so there was this, like, if I don't have to sell, I'm not going to sell. So the amount of homes available for sale went down. And interest rates are super low. So people that had been maybe sitting on the sideline or maybe had a little bit more free money, or hey, they were able to sell their house and move to a more affordable part of the country, or maybe even they were renting, but they were able to move somewhere because they could work remote, like drove this massive explosion in demand. So again, supply and demand, huge amount of demand, very low supply.
Yeah.
That just made home prices crazy expensive. And we're starting to see homes coming down from the peak. Year over year, we're not seeing it. We're still seeing year over year home price gains throughout most of the country. But throughout most of the country over the last 3, 4, 5 months, depending on where you're at, you're seeing month over month pretty steady declines. And so we've come off the peak, but it's not coming down fast enough.
Right.
And for almost everyone that hurts.
Well,
It hurts across the board.
one of the things I talked about in the very short last episode was the idea that no one is also people are not building homes and we're just short homes. There's just not enough to go around. So again, supply and demand. There's a lot of demand. There's no supply, and they're not building supply. It's like what is there. So you have to just. It seems like
I was getting to that.
Oh, okay.
So, and both of the articles that you sent me and in the video that you sent me for this one, they talk about there's not enough construction going on. So, post-housing crash, a lot of builders went out of business. A lot of builders got more restrictive. And one of the big, huge challenges that you ran into in that, too, was that a lot of nationwide builders were suddenly like, I don't want to build low-cost homes. I don't want to build entry-level homes because the margin's not very high. And if this happens again, like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So they started focusing on kind of move-up homes, luxury homes, higher-end homes with a lot less focus on smaller homes and entry-level homes. So
it's very
difficult.
It's a bummer too, because if there was some kind of program to assist with that, like not just for the person acquiring the loan, like myself, if you get FHA, but like the builder to be like, hey, because the way I look at it is, I've always heard this thing. I think I brought this up before, but I've always heard about grocery stores that there's not big margins in grocery stores. You do it because you want to service a neighborhood. It's service oriented. You're like, I'm not here to really get rich. I'm here because I'm from here
to profit.
Right. But it's, like, but you can, but it's not, you're not like, hey, I'm,
profits aren't huge, and there's a reason that the company that owns Safeway bought Albertsons and Kroger's a giant company, so they can get some scales and efficiencies there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, but it's hard, especially for probably independent contractors, to be like, well, I want to be a service-based contractor. It's like, okay, well, we have to make that worth your while. Then we have to do incentives or tax breaks or something, and do you know about anything like that? Because again, as a someone looking for a loan, I can try to find first-time home buyer things. Is there something like that for contractors? Because even looking through the articles, I didn't really see anything specifically for contractors to get
they don't do it the same way for builders. So I don't remember which article it was. I believe it was the Atlantic article talked about there's something like a $4 million shortfall according to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac.
Well, yeah, there was the NPR article. There was
it was in the article from NPR.
Yeah.
So as always, when this gets posted, those will be linked.
Yeah, we'll link those.
We're at something like 4 million homes short of what we need.
Right.
We have millennials entering the market wanting to buy, but of course, right now a lot of them are being priced out or can't afford it.
Right.
Because you're barely not a millennial, so I don't know if I would.
We're part of the forgotten generation, Avin. We can crap on everybody. We can make fun of boomers. We can make fun because nobody cares about Gen X. Nobody cares. They always go straight to boomers, and then the boomers make fun of millennials, and we're just sitting in the shadows, just like you guys duke it out. You guys.
But the millennials are the largest generation.
Yeah,
and they have the buying power right now, and it's really difficult for them to get in the market. And a large part of that, one of the biggest driving forces, is between 2008 and now, builders weren't building homes at the rate that they needed to be building it. So governmentally, I don't see enough discussion coming from the federal government. Basically none. I don't see enough discussion coming from local governments. It's pretty minimal about like how do we incentivize it. And this is where the politics aspect comes in, right? Here in Washington State, building a home is incredibly complicated. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're trying to build entry-level housing, affordable housing, or just generally build your own home or build a development that's, move up homes. It is complicated. Getting through the permit process is extremely expensive, extremely time consuming. Inspections are very difficult. And people might argue that that's for good reason, and I would say you're right. A lot of the rules and regulations that are there are for good reason, but if you care about homelessness, if you care about affordable housing, if you care about multiple families stacking up into small houses because they can't afford to rent a modest home for themselves, then you need to be pushing your politicians. We have to find ways of streamlining the application processes. We have to find ways of incentivizing builders, which for me, if I were going to be doing it, it would be in tax policy and permitting policy. If you're building homes that are considered entry-level homes, certain square footage, certain number of bedrooms, certain number of bathrooms, right? If you're building entry-level homes for purchase, then there should be some form of streamlined application process. There should be some form of tax benefit, because builders need to be incentivized to move into areas that aren't as profitable.
Right.
And on top of that, right, like you've got builders right now that are like, hey, lumber's still super expensive.
Yeah.
Supply chain has really kept lumber prices up. I still can't get all the supplies that I need to build my home, because a lot of what we would use for affordable housing or entry-level housing is still super hard to get because it's not importing correctly. Like we're in this massive sort of like perfect storm of housing right now. And it really feels like government's answer to it, at least from the federal government, is, well, we're just going to keep raising interest rates to force prices down.
Yeah.
The moment rates come back down, every buyer that's on the sidelines is going to be out there basically fist fighting to get the homes that they can get.
Yeah. Well, also there might be a rail worker strike, or it's kind of that's going to affect just moving material around. Like you said, you can't
driver shortages from the trucking industry, rail. I mean, we'll see what ends up happening with rail strike, no strike, right? Because how much timber moves over rail?
Yeah, a lot.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I know for the factory that I work in, I think I've told this story before, but like we actually we were doing a job years ago, and we had to have an all hands on meeting because a train literally derailed and our material was on that train, and nobody was hurt because it was, just a material car or whatever. But it will affect building, and I had to make the smart aleck comment, say, wait, this job's already a train wreck and we haven't even started building it yet. And everybody just looked at me like I was like,
going to name your company.
Right. But I was like, so maybe a curveball is there has been some studies done about, a lot of people are working from home now. A lot of big corporations don't need that office space. And so there has been some initial studies on converting some of those office spaces to condominiums or apartments, which is probably difficult because those were like open, like floor facilities. How do you turn those into housing? And so I have heard, I didn't bring them obviously to the episode, but I have heard some things of them saying like, hey, maybe we should look into this about converting, but it seems to be even expensive even for that. Do you know anything?
That would be a monumental expense. I wouldn't be surprised if you do actually see a lot of those corporate offices and corporate high rises start to get creative with that, because a lot of the larger commercial real estate brokers, most commercial real estate, not all of it, but most commercial real estate operates on long-term leases. Well, if all your workers are working from home, or 50% of your workers are working from home, like you don't need all of that real estate. One of the last job sites that I was working on during the pandemic was a large corporation that had recently bought up extra buildings around themselves so they could do more offices, and literally had occupied them like a week before they closed the doors because of COVID.
Right.
Now they've got this whole other space that they had built out and updated and renovated for an entire division of the company that they aren't going to use. They've flat out made the decision before I left working with that client, we aren't going to use that space anymore. So what happens to it? So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the commercial brokerages start looking at like, hey, how do we convert this to residential? But that's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. You've got, Rainier Tower.
Yeah.
We're not going to use 2/3 of that building anymore for commercial because we can't use it. We'll say half of that building. Well, how do you renovate it? Like you said, it was originally designed for offices. So gut the floor space, completely gut it. And then you've got to go across and tear up all the concrete so you can run all the plumbing and all the electrical, put in all the walls and everything else, right? Like 2/3 of the building you're rebuilding, right?
Yeah, it's
We
rough.
think of going vertical as being the hard part, but the hard part is filling everything in once you've gone up.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where it just kind of like blows me away that like because I do think about that again, it'd be a massive cost, but you're like something's got to be done with these buildings. I think I was hearing some news report about most companies now that they've embraced work to home, or if they have, it's only like maybe 43% of people are actually in office or whatever now, or
Hmm.
people do like partial, like, oh, I'll go in Wednesday, Friday, but I'm off, I'm at home the rest of the week or whatever, like, so like, what do you do with that space? Like it's insane to me. Like,
And there's already new trends in design around how do you build an office space around hotel desk style, part in, part out hybrid work.
yeah,
So there's already new trends in how you do that. Some businesses are beginning to realize that they don't really like the hybrid thing. It's not working out as well as people thought it would.
right.
Like we aren't settled on what's going to ultimately come out of.
Yeah, it just depends. It's company to company. I know some companies, I know in the video game space, some companies have embraced it. In fact, Bungie, that's in Bellevue, Washington, they went totally work from home. And a certain CEO of what do you call it? Social media site was ripping on people that work from home, and they specifically called out Bungie, and Bungie had to respond and say, "No, it's worked out great for us," and they're still releasing content. And so it is company to company, in my opinion. I don't want to crap on Elon Musk, but like, when he's like, it doesn't work, and then
named him.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, when he's like, it doesn't work at all, and there is other companies that have made it work, and they're like, it does work for us. It may not work for you at your whatever.
It depends on your hierarchy and your structure, and it depends on your leadership style and how well you pivot and adjust, right? Like companies are putting spyware on their computers to make sure that people are using their computer for actual work purposes.
Right.
And,
yep.
Right. Like, it started off with, are they clicking on the keys and are they moving their mouse? But it's getting really, really sophisticated to keep track of, are people actually working from home and
Right.
are they not working from home? How many stories have we read about people pulling down 2 full-time jobs working from home to double their income?
Yeah.
During the pandemic, right? Like there's all kinds of advantages and disadvantages to remote work. Like now that I'm 100% work from home for my day job, right? Like my gas consumption has plummeted.
Right.
Like, so that's all that extra money back in our pocket. My wife, same scenario. She now works from home 100%. So
it's got to be great too, because you guys were out of Seattle and you had to commute into Seattle. And I know commuting into any major city, but especially Seattle, is like, I don't want to ever do this again. Like, I mean, so the moment you guys went work from home, you're probably like, yes, finally, I don't have to.
Seattle was 35 miles each way or something like that. So it's like 70 miles a day.
Yeah.
Wear and tear on the car, fuel economy, everything else you get out of it. So to the point of using commercial real estate space, like I think that's difficult. And I think like we can't just make that pivot right away.
Oh,
that's
no.
not going to help.
I mean,
it's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, they're doing
a lot of.
Go ahead.
I see a lot of angry activists that are, like, we need to use golf courses so that we can house the homeless. That's all that wasted land. And to some degree, I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of useful real estate, a lot of valuable real estate. But maybe you should push your politicians to change the zoning laws in your neighborhoods and quit being NIMBYs.
Well, that too. And like, I do find it like in some of the neighborhoods I've been in when I did remodels, where they literally would build around the golf course, like as close as possible. I don't know about easement laws near golf courses, but I've heard stories of people getting winged, when you're up trying to repair a roof and you're like near it. It's like, I wouldn't want to do like
broken windows, all that other stuff, liability and rules and laws.
Yeah, you just look out over the green and go, oh no. Like you see someone tee off. Like I'm not that much of a golfer, but like if I saw somebody, like, there's got to be something. I think this all, and like you said too, at the beginning of this will affect, like me, when I got my home, it was through FHA. It was in the crash. Banks were hungry for people to buy homes. Like, please, we don't want this thing sitting vacant. We did some work to remodel it at the time. Please. And like now it's like, well, you're kind of on your own. Like it seems like, I mean, you can still get loans and things, but it just seems like,
I mean, FHA is still great. There's a ton of first-time homebuyer programs. Washington, almost every state. So on my YouTube channel, Your Agent Guide.
There we go. There's the plug.
I did a video on homebuyer assistance, down payment assistance programs. And a lot of those programs don't require you're a first-time home buyer. They do require that you go through a home buying education course. A lot of the first-time home buyer programs in Washington consider you a first-time home buyer if you haven't owned a primary residence for the last 3 years.
Oh.
So you could literally be a first-time home buyer again if it's been 3.5 years since you previously owned a home. The income limitations, right? A lot of people in Washington make pretty good income because like we have to pay more to live in an expensive area. Well, there are down payment assistance programs in Washington state for families with a combined income of $160K.
I don't know.
Right?
That
like,
seems high. But I mean, that's great. Yeah. Also,
but now, mind you, that's not going to be as good of a program for that family as maybe a family that is on a program that caps at 90K or is more rural focused. There's tons of these programs out there that are designed to help people get into homes. Some of them are lower interest rates. Some of them help with down payment. Like down payment assistance programs will frequently give you 5% for down payment, right? One of the most frustrating things I was reading through these articles and watching on the Breaking Points episode that you shared, was they're talking about, on a $400,000 home with 20% down. Like who puts 20% down?
That seems insane to me.
Even the statistic of people that have sold their home and are buying a new home
would say that they mostly have equity, right, from the sale of it. Mostly,
they've got equity. They've got a ton of money from that sale, so that's what's helping them buy the new home and move up, right? Even those people don't typically put down 20%. I think it's like the average for a previous homeowner moving up is like 17%.
Oh,
that's the average.
Oh,
so right, like when you start talking about these statistics and people are like, well, the average homeowner buying this home with 20% down is paying this much per month, and I'm like, who's putting 20% down?
I would like to say though, back into one of your early points, any program that offers any kind of course on first-time homebuyers, I would definitely recommend doing that if you're thinking about it, because the amount, the amount of questions you have when you buy a home. I mean, I really went in blind. I don't think it was too terrible. I think most of my questions, I had a pretty good real estate agent. Most of those questions got answered, but I think part of it was you just don't know what to ask. And I don't think some real estate agents are good about, hey, what about this? What about that? To take that course and be like, what do I need to know? Because obviously my wife and I are kind of looking, but kind of not because of the interest rates. But she's like, well, what do we need? And I was like, definitely now after buying this home, there's a lot of stuff I want to ask that I wouldn't have even known about. And I got a good deal on my home and everything. Yes, but the idea of not knowing what you don't know. And I almost walked into some sales where I don't think I would have regretted it. I would have made it work. But I think, you don't know what you don't know. And of course, it'll be like, here's the things you need to do. And if there's a person there that's probably a real estate agent teaching the course where you can raise your hand and ask questions and all that kind of stuff.
Usually led by a lender, a loan officer, and a real estate agent. The Washington State Housing Finance Commission does it, but I mean, most states across the country have these related programs. Again, I have a video that goes in quite a bit of depth, has a lot of links that link out to different programs.
Send me the link and I'll link it in the episode so people can watch it or whatever. So,
and it's not like super, super in depth, but it does go into like the national programs that support the local programs, the state programs, some national programs that are sort of independent from federal money, but still help. Like these programs make a huge difference, and most of them, in order to take advantage of it, the ones that went through Washington State for sure, you have to go through their home buyers course. And it's led by a real estate agent and a loan officer. Usually the loan officer is the primary person leading it because they've got to get approved to participate in these programs. I'm actually considering going through and becoming certified to lead these courses too, because you're correct. Like people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and it's a big
reason I started your agent guide was to help with those questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big step, and it's one of those things that once you get the home, everybody has that. If you do own a home like you and I do, you have that feeling of, you talked about before, is it an investment? Is it a home? It's hard to look at it like that. You even have a video on that on your agent guide. But like the idea of coming home is just so great. I remember when I first bought my home the first year, I was like a hermit because it was so easy to come home and be like, I'm home. I'm here.
So you want to have your mind blown?
Yeah, I love having my mind blown on a Sunday morning.
The statistics of family wealth of a homeowner versus a renter, how much do you think the difference is?
I
How much
don't know.
higher is the wealth between a homeowner, a family that owns their home, and a family that rents?
Probably like 5 times, I would imagine.
40.
Wow. That's
Over 40 times the wealth in a home owning family. So why do you think it's so significant, particularly within minority groups?
yeah,
Homeownership
generational.
among
It's
white Americans is over 70%. I want to say it's over 72 or 73% on the most recent statistics. And the numbers I'm quoting are probably old because I just went through my continuing education to renew my license. And that course was written, I want to say, in 2019 or 2020.
That's not bad.
So the data is within a couple of years. Homeownership among white Americans is over 70%.
What is it?
Homeownership among black Americans is like 41%.
Yeah.
And it's the lowest it's been in 40 years. Why? Well, affordability is a huge part of it. Right? There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. We look at redlining and blockbusting, a lot of old historic real estate practices that still carry in. And again, grief of politics, how these rules, these laws that were created 70 years ago are still creating challenges.
Well, not only that, I mean, obviously we've talked about redlining before. It's illegal, but it cropped up. Did you say a couple of years ago? Didn't somebody like Redfin or somebody get in trouble for doing it again? Didn't you say there was somebody? I thought you said like they got caught.
I don't know if it was.
I don't know if it was Redfin. I mean, allegedly there was some lending agency or
redlining is a lending practice,
right?
So it wouldn't have been Redfin.
Yeah, they were
just have been a lender, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was done unintentionally.
Yeah.
Right. Right. You can create laws with the best of intention, but then they can have a disparate impact. They can impact a particular minority group more than they impact another one, which is a big part of why you'll notice that Redfin, Zillow, Realtor.com, most of the major, like even my Keller Williams app that I use for people to do home searching in, none of them have crime data and statistics anymore. Why? Because crime data and statistics tend to disproportionately affect minority neighborhoods.
Well, yeah,
because
that's how you have the
evictions.
Yeah, well, because you have so as a quick aside too, there was that Google engineer who was working with that AI who thought it was sentient, and he said, that a lot of police people started using AI to go over paperwork because it was faster, or it's, they would like filter it first. And he said what happened was minorities did not get paroled when the AI went through them. They were just like, we're not paroling these because, and so that affects the neighborhood that these people move into. It affects home prices, or you have gentrification where people are like, hey, look at all these cheap homes. Like that happened with, was it Katrina in New Orleans, where people that were living there were like, I'm priced out. It happened in Seattle. I mean, I've talked about it before. Many of my relatives said this used to be a working class, whatever, but Amazon, the tech boom there, Google moved in there. I don't know when Google moved into Seattle.
A lot of it isn't even that the homes are necessarily cheap, but you start bringing in high paying jobs and suddenly people that are making way better money than the original locals were are just buying out. Now, gentrification is an unintended consequence of economic growth.
Yeah.
I don't have as big of a problem with gentrification as a lot of people probably do, but maybe that's my more conservative leanings. I see it as just basic economic dynamics, right? Like the people that were living in those neighborhoods sold their properties for a profit.
Yeah.
Because they chose to. They weren't forced to.
No, but I mean, all that kind of stuff, though, like you said, with laws that get passed, it has unintentional consequences. So lower home prices, lower interest rates, you have a community of people there, probably minorities, right? And then all of a sudden, investors, like maybe white people come in and say, this is cheap, we'll just buy all this up, and it's like,
institutional investors. One of the biggest outcries around home price affordability right now is institutional investors. All these hedge funds and
China is another thing.
Investors are buying up all of our homes and making it unaffordable. Well, that is a dynamic of it, still largely driven by the fact that we don't have enough homes. Specifically looking in our region, Seattle has to upzone their neighborhoods, and they're starting to do it in some areas.
What does that mean?
Doing it enough.
Sorry, what does that mean?
We need to go from single family residence to multifamily residences.
Oh.
So, neighborhoods need to start approving things like duplexes and fourplexes or condominium complexes. Like we have to get housing density increased because people that are making good money don't want to commute. And so they're going to spend the extra money to live closer to work to not have to commute. Now, that's not as big of an issue as it was, which is why during the pandemic we saw, excuse me, some of the biggest increases in home values was in more rural areas or further away because, one, homes were more affordable, so you could get more home for the same amount of money. And two, you don't have to commute anymore. Well, people are starting to come back to work, and so they're starting to move kind of back into the cities. But, you make that better. You make it easier for people that work in the city to live in the city by increasing density so that the number of homes available increases your supply to match your demand.
And part of that, when I work in high rises and see this, there's amenity spaces, there's workout spaces, they include parking. They have all these things to like draw people into these areas. And then if you're in Seattle, which is sometimes where I work, you're like, oh yeah, everything's here. I can go to the gym on the 30th floor. I can go down to the bistro on the 4th floor. I can go play pool on the 20th. Like I don't need to go anywhere, And then I can walk around the city if I want to get out.
Let's say you're maybe a shift leader or maybe even like an assistant manager in a Starbucks, right? Like you're not making the big bucks. You're making okay money by most standards. You can't afford to live in Seattle. You're commuting.
Yeah.
Or you've got roommates. And even then, it's still incredibly expensive. And that's true for San Francisco, Seattle, LA, New York.
Yeah.
Like any major metropolitan area, this is going to be the situation. Now, you could make the argument you're making a sacrifice financially so that you don't have to commute or so that you can be closer to amenities that draw people in. But the core argument there is if you want housing affordability and if you're going to outcry about it, then you need to allow upzoning, because I guarantee you developers, if they are zoned and allowed to, will build multi-unit developments because they're going to make money.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, one of the articles said this, and I absolutely loved it. In the grand scheme of things, if you're looking to live in whatever home you buy for 7 to 10 years, buy it. It doesn't matter what the interest rates are. If you can afford the payment without being crippled, if you can afford the payment, you get approved by the bank, because right now bank lending standards are still very tight. Mm-hmm. So if you can afford it, you can pay your bills, you can feed yourself, you're going to live in a home for 7 to 10 years. The odds are that you're going to maybe see a dip in price. The prices will come back up again, but it's your home that you're buying. So
really quickly, isn't there a threshold for income? Like when you buy a home, like you have to have this much disposable. They're not just going to put you on tilt for getting a home. They're like, hey, you can't afford this house.
I don't have the numbers memorized, and I probably should. I probably also have a better feeling for the numbers than I think I do. But for a lot of the down payment programs and first-time home buyers, they'll allow up to, I think, a maximum of 45% debt to income. That includes the mortgage payment and any other debt. But typically they want it under 32-33%.
Yeah, for some reason 30%
housing expense.
30% stuck in my head, but that's an old figure that I didn't know if that had changed at all. So,
so your debt to income ratio is going to be a big impact. And that is really going to dictate what you can actually afford. And then the thing that a lot of people miss, right? Like, again, you don't know what you don't know, right, Joe? Before you bought a home, you're like, oh, my mortgage payment is going to be $1,000 a month. Cool. Oh, but now I have to pay my water bill and sewer and garbage and electric and homeowners insurance and property taxes. So, that $1,000 a month is really $15.
Yeah. And then also, if there's something strange with your home, like mine is old, it's difficult to get insurance. And so I try to be competitive and call different insurance lenders. And very few, the one I have now is brokers. One of the very few brokers that I had covers my home. And so I've tried to call around and they're like, nope. So every year when I get a letter from my broker and they're like, we've raised your price for your insurance, you're like, cool, I can't. There's no competition or very little competition.
You would have to do substantial remodel to get your home recategorized.
Yeah.
So that you could do that. Because our home was built like 10 years after yours.
Oh,
I
nice.
think.
Nice.
Because your home was built late 1800s.
Yeah, like 18 something, or like 1898 or 99 or something like that.
Our home was built in 1908.
Nice.
We don't have that problem at all.
Oh, yeah.
But at some point in time in our home's history, they gutted it. So I don't have Latin plaster like you do. Even though all the knob and tube in your place has been disabled,
no,
it's not all fully removed.
I don't know. There's stuff in the attic where I'm like, this could be something, like
None of it's hot, right? Like you've tested it.
it was tested when the home was inspected. I would have to look at that inspection, but he did clip the wire to see. But I just see those knob and tube. I'm like, this is something. I can't just. I don't know.
So right, like in your home, you still actually have the knob and tube. You're not 100% sure, which I'm almost positive it's probably been clipped so they could connect in the new wiring.
Probably
whatever new.
Well, I have a breaker box, so that that's
correct.
I don't have fuses, so that's a thing.
Our home, there's no knob and tube anywhere. Like it's all been completely gutted. Everything's drywall. Like the roof has been reinforced and redone.
Lucky man. Lucky man.
We have actual insulation in our walls.
Hey, come on. They put newspaper in there in 1899. I'm sure mine is still in the wall somewhere.
So the point I'm getting at, right, is like, in a situation like that, you can update it. Now, bringing it back to the episode, like that's what you and I've done. Our first time homes that we bought older homes that need additional work and have kind of other side effects and sacrifices. And for people that are already really strapped and tight on cash, right? Like those are the kinds of things you look at. Homes that are older, fixer upper, livable, but not perfect, right? Like you're not going to move into a 2,500 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with a 4-car garage on half an acre.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the other sort of misnomer that we get when we see a lot of this news. And I think it's very unfortunate is it misleads a lot of people that could afford homes into thinking that they can't, because there are a lot of homes out there that are way under the median purchase price for your area.
Yeah.
Because the median purchase price is exactly that. It's the median. It's not every single home. Or if you look at the average, same scenario, right? Like Snohomish County this month, last month, Snohomish County was just under $700,000 for an average home purchase price, but the median was like almost 770.
I think too, it is. I mean, like we talked about, your home, you want it to feel like your home. But I think when I first bought a home, also what I did is I got in this thing of like, I need everything I want. What I want a fence. I'm just going to make stuff up. I want a pool. I want this. I want 3 stories. I want a full basement. And you want to be happy with it. You want to be able to make concessions. You want to be able to walk in and go, I feel good here. It isn't everything I want, but I feel good. It feels like a home. And now I can just sit here and build equity as a nice asterisk, a nice extracurricular thing that I'm doing by just living in the home.
And right, like I think we run into that a lot too. That's another sort of
that's
cultural hang up that we run into a lot, right? Is I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and paying hundreds of thousands in interest on this home when I buy it. It needs to be perfect. Does it? I mean, how much money are you throwing away at rent? You don't see a penny of that ever again.
Yeah, and
the landlord does.
And that has to do with the grief of it, of like you have to let some of that go and say, I'm happy with what I have. Like, this is what I need, because
finding contentment in what's available and like, what are your actual priorities? And that's where a good real estate agent, real estate broker is going to be really helpful. Is they're going to kind of, I tell people all the time, right? Like, oh, I don't want an agent. I don't need one yet. We're not even really looking. Like, no, like find one that you know and you like and you trust and start grilling them 5 years in advance if you have to, because they're going to help you.
Yeah. I mean, that was one thing I will say that was nice about my real estate is like we walked into this place that I'm in now and I was like, and they were like, well, there's potential and it is a home, and they try to, I don't think that they're lying to you because I think that's also illegal. I don't think they can, but they go, really look at, you have high ceilings. The roof is new. Like focus on the positive, be like, yeah, I can work with this, And again, that comes into the grief of you have to let stuff go. You have to be willing to compromise. And you will find that out through the house buying process that there will be some compromises. There will be some phone calls. You're like, I'm doing what now? But if you're okay with
a housing shortage like we're running into right now, unless you're flush with cash, you're not going to get your perfect home.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just how
the reality of it is, if you're not building your own home, you're probably going to make concessions anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. We're kind of running at the end a little bit, but so what do you think? Like we talked about in the beginning, what do you think needs to like to not just make everything better, but do you think there's like some incremental things, not just the government can do? Do you think there needs to be more incentives for? I mean, obviously incentives for home builders. Like, what do you see good steps to like improve? You know,
I mean, improving the housing market as it is currently, right? Like right off the bat, in the next 6 months, the Federal Reserve is going to reverse its interest rate hikes, or at least it's going to put them on pause.
oh, you think it is,
So,
or
I, as I've said before, anyone who says they know for sure either is trying to sell you something or is an idiot.
and I have this oil that like you could buy
because we never really honestly fully know what's going on. But based off of the data that we have now and kind of looking forward, future casting, sometime in the next 6 months, inflation is beginning to get under control. We're beginning to see inflation cooling. When we get to March and we lap last year when inflation was at its peak, and the war in Ukraine started, and we started seeing like major spikes in inflation. Once we lap that, since we're beginning to see cooling, I think inflation is really going to start to cool.
Well, another thing really quickly is fuel has gone down as well. The cost of fuel has been slowly dipping, so that you have a little bit more money in your pocket if you're commuting and all that. Like it's granular, but I mean, if that continues, which I heard it will continue to go down, yeah,
it helps. It really does. I shouldn't be downplaying it. It's just fuel is more volatile than.
Well, that and if fuel goes up or down, we have to pay. Everybody, unless you have you could have an electric vehicle. I don't know, but they're rare, right? So it's more rare. It's not the norm. So
electricity goes up and down too, and that can change dramatically really quickly.
Well, depending on where you are, demand in your state and regulations on how they raise stuff, depending on what certain states you live in that maybe privatize their electrical grid as opposed to. We talked about that before.
So interest rates will start to come back down, and that's going to help affordability, but that's not going to help home prices. And so if you're locked in on home prices and you're not looked at home affordability, it's going to be real bleak.
Yeah.
Because as I said, we still have a ton of pent up demand. And as rates start to come back down, all those buyers that have been sitting and waiting are going to come back out on the market. And honestly, the ones that are ready to jump right away are going to be the ones that get the best deals.
Right.
Because
they've been doing their homework. They've been saving the money. They've been laser focused on.
Well, and they're going to get on the front edge of the home price dip.
And they already have like 5 homes with their concessions. They're like, I want A, I want B. Okay, if this goes, then we're going to go down to here. Like they're literally like a horse just out of the gate, just waiting to like hit the mark or whatever.
That's going to help people a ton. I don't expect that we'll ever see interest rates 3 or below again in our lifetime, unless there's something like catastrophically goes wrong again, or major pandemic,
hopefully,
or something else.
Let's not hope for any of that. Let's just hope they naturally go down a little bit.
As interest rates start to come back down, though, we probably will see more homes come to market. So then it's going to be a matter of how many pent up buyers do we have waiting versus how many sellers that have sort of been on the fence waiting. Because who wants to sell right now? If you sell your home to go buy a home, like you're going to lose the really great interest rate you got when you refinanced or bought in the last couple of years to go buy a home at 6.5%.
Yeah. So we've talked about it before. You could have equity, but that's just going to be sucked out of it's going to be a lateral move that it's going to get sucked into the down payment. It's going to be sucked into your monthly payment, well, not your down payment,
but balance in there. And personally, until we start seeing more building going on, I think it's going to be really difficult. Now, if we do see a genuine recession, and a lot of people are saying we are going to get a recession because the Fed is pushing the rates too far. If we do see a genuine recession as we think of it, not just an earnings recession within businesses, but we actually start seeing mass layoffs, then we might see more of a 2008 style home price come down. Right. So it's possible. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't think it's very likely that we'll see that, because that was driven by really lax lending standards. And right now our lending standards are great. People that are buying homes are very heavily vetted. So anyone that's saying foreclosures are up 150% is forgetting that last year you couldn't foreclose in like 80% of the country.
So they were just holding the foreclosures basically. Yeah.
They were just waiting.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. So
So then you have artificially inflated foreclosure numbers, and I mean, banks aren't foreclosing if they don't have to, right? Like they're offering restructures, they're offering longer term loans,
Yeah,
whatever they can.
They don't want these houses.
Banks have now learned, I don't want to own this home.
I don't. Yeah, exactly how I moved into my home. I went into the bank that owned the house, and they were going over the properties they had, and they said we really don't. The bank clerk, the assistant associate was like, we do not just want these to sit there. We're just paying for it to sit there. Why don't you buy it and give us the mortgage money and all that? We don't want that. We don't want
the 2008 crisis actually had a couple of really good benefits that came out of it. And one, our lending standards tightened back up. And I don't think banks are ever going to do that again. Well, I shouldn't say that. Humans have pretty short memories. But the other thing that came out of it is that banks learned, I don't want to own a lot of real estate. So they started coming up with new ways to help people restructure and refinance debt so that they can keep people in the home as long as possible so they don't lose money. They will foreclose if they have to, but they don't want to. So from a regulatory standpoint, right, like the Federal Reserve beginning to lower rates and stopping increases, that has an impact on bond rates. And then that has an impact on mortgage-backed securities. And mortgage-backed securities are ultimately what set interest rates on loans. So if you watch the Fed rate and you watch the average 30-year mortgage rate on charts, you'll see that they're very closely related, and they're not tied in any way, shape, or form. But because of the way bond rates impact the mortgage-backed security rates, it has an impact on what your mortgage rates are. So as the Fed starts loosening policy again, that's going to help people. So there's the government helping in that. Locally, state governments, city governments need to figure out ways to incentivize
builders,
entry-level housing through
the builders,
streamlined permitting, and through tax incentives to the builders. Now, there are hey, if you put affordable housing in your new development, if a certain number of units are affordable housing units, then we'll give you this break or this incentive. Seattle does a lot of that. I don't think that works, and I don't think it's enough because to move the needle, we need tens of thousands of units across the country.
Right.
We're 4 million homes short.
It can't just be a part of one section in a cul-de-sac or a development or whatever. It's got to be the development.
I'm going to do the math on it real quick here. If we're 4 million homes short across the country, that's 80,000 homes per state. Now, of course, some states are going to have more and some are going to have less just by the nature of population density.
Yep.
But you're not going to do that by a new multi-use condo complex getting built in downtown where they're required to have 5 units that are affordable housing.
Yeah, it's rough. I'll just say it is terrible to see this whole thing play out because there is, like you said, millennials are the biggest population, percentage
generation.
Yeah, you want to see, that generational thing. That idea of the American dream of you know what, you can live here when I leave, or if you don't, I'm going to sell the home. You're going to be able to take that money and move somewhere you want to move. To not have that, to just be renting a place and say, I guess you can rent a place when you get old enough, when you turn 18, that's affecting, there's such a ripple effect of that through.
If we do focus on new construction, we need more homes in our major cities. If we start putting in condos, affordable entry-level condos, entry-level homes and developments, right? That has a major tie-on effect of suppressing rent increases. Because if you can buy a home for the same or less than what you pay in rent, why on earth would you rent? Unless you're transient, right? I'm only going to live here for 2 years. There's no purpose.
And then the landlords have to be competitive, right? They can't just go, you got to come to me. You got to come. It's no, I can go wherever.
Investors are the ones that go in and buy it up. Even if an investor buys a home that's $200,000 less than the average purchase price in an area, they're not going to rent it for the same amount that they would rent because there's competition. Oh, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, I'm not going to pay the same rent as I would for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
It's
a garage.
Right. It's crazy. But Avin, you've kind of already plugged it, but go ahead and plug what you were, your stuff you were going to plug, and send me the link to that one with the the first time homebuyers program, at least for Washington, because
down payment assistance.
Send that link to me. I'll link it in the show notes, like I said. So,
I brought it up before. Your Agent Guide on YouTube. Check me out. Your Agent Guide on Facebook. I post regularly, like every single day, just useful tips and data there.
What are your videos? Your videos are still weekly?
Educational videos. What was that?
Are your videos still weekly, right? You still try to pump out one video a week?
Since my trip to Japan, no, I haven't been doing them weekly, but I will be starting that back up again now that I've got all my continuing education credits taken care of.
Yeah, you had to study for like 40 some odd hours. So that kind of cuts into your
90.
Okay. Well, yeah, it kind of cuts into your like extra time you have to make a video or something yeah. So,
mind you, I didn't do all 90 in the last month, but I got sick and it was Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So yeah. I will admit I got behind all those videos, but there's still quite a few videos out there that are super useful information for anyone that's beginning the home buying process, or maybe it's been long enough that they don't remember the whole process altogether. So 100% check it out.
Also, I know I'm your friend and everything, but I do like the fact that the videos are maybe 8 to 10 minutes long. And some of them are shorter. I do enjoy that, where, that obviously time is precious. And if you can get some information in 10 minutes or watch a video for 30 minutes, I would rather watch the 10-minute video. So,
and if you think I'm wrong about something, feel free to call me out, right? Because I'm always looking to learn. I'm always looking for new perspective, right? As a realtor, the realtor code of ethics is something that I take very seriously, but also I agree very much with the mission of the National Association of Realtors to improve housing and get access for housing for more Americans, to promote housing in our communities. It is a huge deal.
That is literally how a community is built, is a bunch of people together, that's the bedrock of a community is.
And no organization is perfect, right? If you want to call out mistakes or decisions or policies that they support that are bad, right? Like it happens.
Yeah. No,
but they really do try to advance and grow. They've done some stuff to really help with, promoting housing among minorities. Like they're working really hard to find new ways and support new policies to help with that. So I'm a big part. If you have any questions, of course, too, feel free to reach out. questions@youragentguide.com, and I would gladly answer them. Anything around this too. This is a huge issue. I really appreciate that we went with this one and that we came back.
Well, yeah, because at the moment you were like, I'm sick, and it was like a 20-minute episode. I was like, this isn't right. This is like, I know Avin. I mean, obviously, we didn't even read the articles that we linked because we just were asking questions, and I think it was a good episode. But the thing is like, you're so passionate about this. I think you said over the phone a few months ago before you got sick, you're like, yeah, do we need to split it up into 2 episodes? Because I could just talk. And I was like, maybe, but I don't think we need to. But it's just one of those things where I knew we had to revisit it because you're so passionate about it. It's like, you don't take your star quarterback and bench him. You're like, no, that guy knows what he's doing. Bring him out. Like, I was like,
I don't know if I'd say I'm a star quarterback of the show, but on this particular topic, I am the subject matter expert.
Yeah. So, the only thing I want to plug is obviously Gaming with Grief. It comes out once a week. This comes out once a month, but that comes out once a week. You can go to www.gamingwithgrief.com. Subscribe to the podcast, our podcast, The Grief of Politics, on either Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. We hit the 20th of every month. That's when it goes up, the audio and the video goes up, so you can see our faces, or just listen to it in a podcast form if you want to. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's about it this week. I don't know what we're going to talk about for the next year. That usually we try to talk about what we're going to, say what we're going to talk about, but I don't know because it's going to be a new year, new everything. So it'll be a surprise. So everybody have a good month, and Avin and I will talk to you next month.
All right.